Welcome to Lesson 7 in Unit 8, Putting on a Show with Light and Sound. In this lesson, students will work to answer the question, how can we use light to make shadow puppets? In this lesson, students plan and conduct an investigation about how different materials interact with light and how these materials can be used to create shadows using a light source. Students figure out different materials allow different amounts of light to pass through. Changing the distance of a light source from an object changes the size of the shadow created. Students make connections to the storyline by figuring out how they can use different materials to create different shadows and how they can use distance from the light source to change the size of these shadows in their puppet show. There are several opportunities for ELA cross-curricular connections throughout the lesson. You can look for specific standard connections in the Unit 8 Teacher Guide. This lesson will take approximately 3 to 4 days to complete. For the Engage portion, you'll review how light can illuminate objects in the dark and play the video of puppet shadows. After asking students what they notice and wonder about the video, you'll revisit the driving question board. You'll add any new questions and highlight others connected to the learning goals of this lesson by calling attention to questions about how to make or change a shadow. For the Explore portion, you'll set up the shadow investigation. See the tutorial slides for detailed instructions for setup and procedures. Students will make basic shadow puppets out of several materials and investigate their interactions with light. For the Explain portion, you'll bring the class together and lead a discussion about students' observations about the shadow investigation. You'll use the provided questions to guide your discussion around the question, how can we use light to make shadow puppets? The goal of this class discussion is to develop a simple model based on evidence from the investigation. You'll use the discussion to create the Lesson 7 summary chart. By the end of the discussion, students should understand that light is used to make and change shadows for the shadow puppet show. You'll start the discussion during the Explain and finish it during the Elaborate. During the discussion, you'll read My Size Shadows and post the opaque, light source, reflective, translucent, light blocker, and shadow vocabulary cards. Students will also use the Shadows Investigation student journal page to use arrows to show how materials allow different amounts of light to pass through them and reflective materials redirect light beams. They will answer the question on the last page at the end of the lesson. They will also make a claim about what material they will use for their shadow puppet using evidence from their observations. For the Elaborate portion, you'll ask students how they think they can make shadows larger or smaller. You'll have them record their predictions on the Changing the Size of Shadows student journal page and briefly discuss student ideas. You'll then ask students to experiment with their stick puppets they made in the Explore and their flashlight to make the shadow of their puppet bigger and smaller. They can draw their observations on the journal page. You'll have students use the puppets they made in the lesson to make up a simple story about the puppet growing or shrinking. You'll ask what they have figured out so far to help them understand how they can use light and different materials to create a puppet show. This will complete the summary chart. For the Evaluate, you'll have students answer the final question on the Shadows Investigation student journal page. To support student sense-making across the unit, you'll orient them back to the driving question board. You'll ask students, what did we learn about how you can use light to make shadow puppets? And what new questions do we have? By the end of this lesson, students will have planned and conducted an investigation about how different materials affect the path of light, developed a model to explain how shadows are created, and planned and conducted an investigation to collect evidence about what causes the size of a shadow to change. In Lesson 8, students will synthesize what they know about light and sound to put on a show with musical instruments and shadow puppets. For the optional Extend, you'll tell students that they will now have another opportunity to communicate like a computer does by using coding. This time they will communicate like a computer to make a puppet. Students can brainstorm a character that they want to use in their shadow puppet show and write down or draw each step and sketch their character on the Coding a Shadow Puppet student journal page. You'll then put students in pairs and have them give their directions to their partner without sharing the sketch that is on the paper, and see if their partner can draw their character. For more information about this unit, visit mysitepartners.com.